2 balls and a strike to count on Taylor. Reyes fires, swinging a drive, deep left field. It's his way back. Walk the ball. Chris Taylor.
What's up, everybody? Welcome into DodgerHeads Live, presented by DodgerBlue.com, part of the Blue Wire Podcast Network. My name is Jeff Spiegel. Tonight, I'm joined by Justin Lorber, a.k.a. Future Dodgers. We're excited for all the people joining us on YouTube, joining us on Facebook, folks listening to this podcast after the fact. We appreciate all of you. Justin, where are you at with the Dodgers right now? Are we still mourning last season? Have we moved on to 2023? I mean, your name is Future Dodgers, so I feel like I might know the answer to that question.
Always looking forward. Now, we were talking about this right before we went live. I kind of checked out like the last month of the year and then checked back in for the playoffs. So after a couple of days, honestly, it wasn't that difficult to check out despite what was, I'd say, a pretty painful loss if you put it up there with the last 10 years or so playoff losses. But yeah, nothing else to do but look forward.
There we go. That's my attitude. I'm an optimist and I'm a forward thinker. We've got lots to talk about tonight because as weird as the Major League Baseball offseason is, it goes through these stages. And there's a long stage upcoming where I feel like nothing is going to happen for a long time. But that first 2 weeks right after the World Series ends, you've got qualifying offers, you've got the Rule 5 stuff, which we'll get to. So there was actually a lot of movement. Some free agents have come off the board. Tyler Anderson, notable among them. So Justin, as I was thinking about this show, I thought of first 5 questions, then I expanded to 6, what I would call the 6 biggest questions facing the Dodgers this offseason. These 6 are going to be in no particular order, so it's not like 1 is the most important question, 6 is the least important. And if we got time, I might throw a Thanksgiving-themed question at number 7. But let's get to, well, here's what the plan for talking about. My 6 questions are, I want to talk about Cody Bellinger. I want to talk about shortstop. I want to talk about whether we're comfortable with Astros. I want to talk about Aaron Judge. I want to talk about prospects who may or may not be ready to contribute. And I want to talk about the pitching staff. But let's start with Cody Bellinger because that's kind of the biggest headline of the past week. And I'll phrase the question to you, Justin, like this. Was non-tendering Cody Bellinger a mistake? What do you say to that question?
I'd say you can't really answer that right now because if you're basing it off the last 2 years when he has performed not great offensively, would be generous, outside of like a 3-week stretch in September and October 2021, it hasn't been there. And physically, he has not been the same guy that he was in 2019 or even 2020 in the short season when he didn't perform like an MVP, but physically he just hasn't been there post-shoulder surgery. If you look at his max exit velocity, which a lot of people use as a proxy for raw power, generally probably a better to use 90th percentile at max exit velo, but don't have that publicly available. So max exit velo way down from 2020, 2021, and 2022. I think he's like roughly equal to Austin Barnes in terms of max exit velocity. And this is a guy who was one of the game's premier power hitters for the first few years of his career. And the defense is, of course, still there, and that's very valuable in a position like center field. But the offense just hasn't been there in 2 years. And I think you can excuse 2021 for the shoulder surgery. You would have hoped to see, some progress, maybe not all the way back, but some progress back from that this year. And it just really wasn't there. I think it's tough to be mad at, them saying we don't believe that's worth $18 million, or at the very least, we can potentially get him back and save some money. It seems like they might try to get under the luxury tax this year. I don't know. They've made some comments that they might want to, and I'm sure we can talk about that later in the show. But if they do, $5 million or so could make a difference.
Yeah. I mean, let me ask you this about Bellinger. What level of confidence do you have that Cody Bellinger can become a league average offensive player again in the next 2 years?
Yeah. I don't know, because
if I gave you even odds on Cody Bellinger posting a weighted runs created plus of 100 or higher in the next 2 seasons, would you bet yes or bet no?
Are we doing combined next 2 seasons or one of the next?
One of the 2 years he posts a 100 or higher.
I would take it. I wouldn't take the combined one. I would take individually.
hope he plays 30 games one season, gets off to a hot start, and then gets injured or something like that? No, I'm just messing with you.
Yeah, it's tough to separate. Well, what is he not? He hasn't been fully healthy since the shoulder injury, and he's still not all the way back. What is there are legitimate mechanical, changes that he has made coming back from that injury and the leg injury he had in the first week of 2021, which there's an article at Prospects Live that came out a couple months ago that I would encourage people to go read. Kind of chronicles the series of mechanical changes that he has made since 2019 and how it's contributed to him being a much worse offensive player and what part of it's mental. It's tough to sort of quantify those things because, if it were just physical, that'd be one thing. You can say, okay, well, now he's going to be 2 years removed from shoulder surgery. He can probably get back to that guy, but it's tough to separate those three factors out into, different things.
Yeah, and I think the important piece that I always try and emphasize on the Bellinger conversation, this isn't so much a referendum just on Cody Bellinger, the player, as much as it is Cody Bellinger, the player, at an $18 million projected salary, right? We're not talking about, would you like to have Cody Bellinger back at $12 million? We don't know what the Dodgers' answer to that question would be. What we do know the answer is the Dodgers didn't want to take the chance that he was going to be guaranteed $18 million, which I think matters because I'm high on Cody Bellinger's defense. I think he's elite out there. I would bet no on the weighted runs created plus. This year he was 83. So, I mean, that's better than 47 from the year before. I'll end the Cody Bellinger conversation, Justin, by asking you this. Would you want Cody Bellinger back on a smaller deal? Like, if you could get him at 10 to 12 million bucks for 2 years or more, would you be interested in that type of thing?
I think so. I think just because if this were a free agent coming from another team, this is the type of player I think a lot of, Dodger commentators and fans would be looking at and be like, all right, let's bring him in. Let's see if the Dodgers offensive guys can work with him and get it back to the guy he once was. He hasn't been fully healthy. So when you look at it that way, yeah, this is a guy that you might want to take a shot on. I think if there is a deal to be had between them, it might be some kind of incentive-laden deal, especially if it's multiple years.
Yeah.
You're talking about a lot of incentives there because former MVPs, in their mid-20s aren't guys that you signed for 1 to 2 years at 10 to 12 million a year. So if there's any shot he can get back to that, he's going to want to, make sure that he can cash in.
Yeah. And I think you make a great point with the Dodgers love reclamation projects like Cody Bellinger. And yet part of the reason that I've been hesitant when people have come at me on Twitter saying, oh my gosh, the Dodgers are going to regret this. Like, what if he turns it around? Usually it's the Dodgers that turn guys around. Like I'm firmly of the belief that if the Dodgers couldn't fix Cody Bellinger, I wouldn't feel confident that the Cubs are going to fix Cody Bellinger or that whatever team out there is interested in Cody Bellinger is going to be the one. And so I think the fact that the Dodgers have had him in their system for a couple of years, they kicked the tires on it. It didn't work, clearly. Now you could point to injuries. I think, like you said, there's a mental piece, there's a physical piece, there's a lot going on. And so for me, I think it's best for all parties to move on. Now, if Cody Bellinger was back on like a 1 year, $10 million deal, something like that, I wouldn't mind. I wouldn't be over the moon about it because I think he's that bad offensively. And we're going to get to a guy like James Outman and whether or not he can give you 75, 80% of what Cody Bellinger could potentially give you. We'll get to that in the prospects section here. But I think we're both agreeing that, well, I say non-tendering Cody Bellinger was not a mistake. It sounds like you're sort of more on the fence of you could have gone either way. But if I'm reading between the lines, it sounds like you'd rather not pay Cody Bellinger $18 million next season.
I think if you're looking at it from, is Cody Bellinger worth $18 million next year, or is he likely to be?
Yeah.
I don't know. I think probably lean no on that, okay. But it's not my money, and the Dodgers certainly have a lot of money to play with. Yeah. So giving him what would essentially be a 1 year, $18 million deal, not the worst thing you can do. There are really no such things as bad 1 year deals.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, let's get to what I think is a question we've sort of danced around that isn't on my list, but is worth talking about, which is what you referenced about these comments about the CBT, competitive balance threshold, whatever they call it, and the Dodgers seemingly interested in resetting this. Now, I kind of go back and forth because I know you and I have had conversations where we say the Dodgers are making millions of dollars. They have plenty of money to spend. They should just be spending their money. I don't disagree with any of those things. I also think there's a level of reality where at some point paying like a 70% tax on some amount of money that you go over this threshold in a sport where the best team doesn't always win once you get to the postseason. I understand sort of just the logical business arguments against it. And so I guess what I'm saying is there's a part of me that understands the thinking of, hey, at some point just resetting this every 5 years is probably the only way to make this sustainable. And it seems like that's where the Dodgers are going, because if you didn't care about the taxes, you probably keep Cody Bellinger around. You probably keep a guy like Edwin Rios around. You probably make some Tyler Anderson maybe as a guy that you pony up $13 million a year for to keep him around. And so what do you make of sort of the hints that the Dodgers have been dropping? And if it is the case, if they are eager to get under, which would leave them, I believe, post Clayton Kershaw contract, something like $50 million under the threshold as we stand here today. What do you make of all that?
I mean, I don't love it, obviously, because it is a sport with no salary cap. There is, in theory, there's no limit to the amount that they can spend. And for the Dodgers, the limit of what they would spend in order to not be profitable is absurdly up there.
Yeah.
Like, sign every free agent this offseason and then still have room. Well, maybe not that much, but you get the idea.
Yeah.
So I really don't love it, because $50 million, there are holes on this team to fill. And yes, some of them can be filled internally, and they have young guys who are, toward the top of the system that they'd like to give a chance to, win a job and become a regular contributor. But I really don't like the idea of, setting this line and say, well, we're going to reset this year and then, go back over the next couple of years, because all we're talking about, there are different thresholds for the luxury tax. So if you only go over the first threshold, you're only paying 50% on what you do over. So if you go 10 million over, that's just, you're paying a 50% tax on that. You're paying
It's just $5 million. It's just,
and yes, like we're talking about that like it's not an absurdly huge amount of money to basically everyone, but in sports dollars, that's not a lot of money.
Yeah.
So I would prefer if they didn't, but they might anyway, and not care what I think.
I mean, one thing I was thinking about is part of the reason that a farm system is so valuable is two things. One is obviously that it can provide you with inexpensive players to fill out your roster, hopefully very good ones, such as Will Smith and, some of the other guys that are up on the Julio Urias, who's still, on the rookie deal, those types of things. But the other one is, like, in a situation like this, like if Andrew Friedman, which he claims is not true, sort of got some sort of note, hey, we'd like to go under at some point, let's reset the taxes here a little bit. The other thing they could do is package some of these guys for the same caliber of player that might cost them $35 to $40 million in the free agency, but package some of their younger guys to go get somebody who's still on a rookie deal or who's still in arbitration, who's $20 million less expensive. And just to throw a name out there, like we're going to talk shortstops here in a moment. There's guys like Tim Anderson that could potentially be available out there who would be dramatically cheaper. I haven't looked at what Tim Anderson is projected to make this year, but I'm guessing he's $20+ million less expensive than Trey Turner or Carlos Correa or somebody like that. So that would be the other option. There's a way to stay under the threshold while also remaining incredibly competitive. Now, the sacrifice there is not financial. It's the depth of prospects, which at some point, you know more about the system than me. It feels like at some point they're going to get to a moment where they have too many guys that are in the farm system that they can't protect. And so packaging some of these guys, even some of the higher end guys, in order to do that. Like, what do you think about going that route and saying, well, we've got like the Andy Pages types who are now on the 40-man roster and probably not going to be contributing up here for a couple of years. There's still a variance that this might not totally pan out. So do we go package him and somebody else for the type of player that could actually fill in at a major league level and be incredibly competitive while also saving us money? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. And I think kind of switching gears on the pitching side of the prospect spectrum, they have shown an ability to continue to produce, potentially impactful pitching prospects and even target guys from other organizations like a Kyle Hurt who was traded in the Dylan Floro deal from Miami, Nick Frasso, who was traded in the Mitch White deal from Toronto. They've targeted guys from other organizations. River Ryan, who they got from Matt Beatty from San Diego. They've got these guys, and these are now like legit prospects. And maybe Frasso was like the only one who was traded as a somewhat notable prospect, and the other two have had breakout campaigns the last year or so. So they've shown that they can, continue to produce pitching prospects, and everyone needs pitching, and pitching prospects can be, tough to deal because pitching prospects get hurt. Pitching prospects, there's a variance there, but yeah, especially now with a lot of them trending towards the top of the system, certain guys getting left off the 40-man who in other organizations might be additions, or just in different years might be additions. So I think you're right on that, in that if there is a limit and they're not looking to go over that, even that first luxury tax threshold, I think it wouldn't be the worst idea to think about trading some of those guys on the periphery of the 40-man roster for major league talent.
Yeah. So Tim Anderson, just looking up his contract, they signed him to an extension. So he's got two years left on this deal at $12 million and $14.5 million over the next 2 years. Those are both club options. And so if you can go trade for like a guy for Tim Anderson, I mean, that number is at least $20 million less than what Trey Turner is going to cost you next year if you were to sign him to a deal. And also, when Anderson does become a free agent, it would be 2 years after you had reset the tax. And so in theory, you would then be able to go and sign somebody like Anderson to a bigger deal. So the timeline would line up. So just something to monitor. I'm sure something that will float under the surface of the rest of these conversations. But I do think that's worth pointing out and worth talking about, because I know that tax threshold is going to be a talking point over the next 6 months. Let me get to question number 2 here. And it's I'll phrase it in one way that leads to a bigger conversation. But let's talk about the shortstop position, and I'll frame it this way. Justin, is Gavin Lux a viable option at shortstop next season? And if not, where would you go at this position?
Sure, like viable. You could throw him out there, and it'll.
If you have World Series aspirations, is Gavin Lux a viable option at shortstop?
I don't think he's Plan A. I feel like that is kind of the question you're answering. I don't think he should be Plan A.
Okay.
I think the plan this offseason should be to bring in a shortstop and have Gavin Lux remain at second base. If that fails and you have Gavin Lux and maybe Chris Taylor and maybe Jacob Abaya as your shortstops, yeah, like you can win a World Series with those guys at your shortstops, but I don't think that should be Plan A. I think especially with the number of shortstops available this offseason, A, in free agency, and B, potentially on the trade market, that should be a position that is targeted for an external upgrade.
Okay, so let me frame it to you slightly differently. If, let's say hypothetically, the Dodgers had $50 million to spend this year, and you and I would both agree that there are probably 3 glaring weaknesses on the roster. There's a glaring weakness in the outfield right now, there's a glaring weakness at starting pitcher right now, and there is a glaring weakness at shortstop. If you had to pick one of the 3 of those not to address, which of the 3 would you choose to say, we'll look internally to try and solve this one? And when I talk outfield, there's a center field position and a left field position potentially available. And on the starting rotation, there's a whole host of questions that we'll get to later. But I'm just curious, I think the Gavin Lux question from my perspective, if I could just tip my hand a little bit, is that of those 3, I think I would feel most comfortable with the Dodgers trotting out Gavin Lux and saving money at shortstop and going and splashing cash to try and get an impact bat in the outfield and or an impact arm in the rotation.
So when you say leave alone, do you mean like not trades either? Just
yeah, I mean, and so trades are sort of the caveat to this whole question. Yeah, so fair. Take it wherever you want to take it.
I would probably say, I would leave the starting rotation alone.
All right.
With the idea that you have a lot of guys at the top of the system and you don't need all of them to play impact roles next year. If you're not doing any external additions, no free agency, no trades, all you need is like 1, maybe 2 of those guys to be potential impact guys. And Ryan Pepio, Bobby Miller, Gavin Stone, and then guys like Andre Jackson and Michael Grove, all at AAA or above.
Yeah.
So all guys who could very conceivably contribute to a major league winning team in 2023. And, there are starting pitchers out there on the trade market. You can go get guys at, depth rotation arms if that's what they want to do. So I would probably focus more on the offensive side in free agency, at least.
Okay. Well, that leads perfectly to my next question, which is, are we okay with Astros? If you want to go external at the shortstop position, I would argue that if I take off my Dodger fan glasses, that Carlos Correa is the best option at shortstop. I think he is the most projectable guy moving forward offensively. I think he's the best defensive guy moving forward as well. Probably not super expensive based on the contract he signed a year ago. Like that was a very. He could have signed a different contract, but the fact that he chose the best option in his mind was 3 years and $100 million was pretty surprising to me. So maybe there's a slight discount to be had there compared to a guy like Trey Turner. But before we answer the Carlos Correa specific question, I'm curious. We're going to talk Justin Verlander a little bit later. Are you okay with signing Verlander, Correa, those types of guys coming from that Astros team?
I mean, I would prefer not to, but I think like you said, if you look at this just pure objectively, I agree. Carlos Correa probably is the best shortstop option long-term that's available on the free agent market. And I've talked about this with a couple people, and I don't like that I've come to this place where it's like, yeah, I guess if they signed him, I'd be okay with it. Maybe I have to come around at some point. I can be honest and say I would prefer other options. I would prefer if I didn't have to root for Carlos Correa or Justin Verlander. If that's what it ends up being, I'll probably end up coming around. With Verlander, I think there's a difference because there are other starting pitchers available. It's not you have to go get Verlander. We're still talking about a starting pitcher, who had a pretty recent Tommy John surgery. I know he won the Cy Young this year, but late 30s. Not sure how comfortable they'd be committing a ton of money or even something like a 3-year deal. I read somewhere he wants essentially the Max Scherzer deal, which is 3 years, $40 million a year. Yeah. And that's a lot.
Yeah.
So with Correa, I think you can potentially rationalize it more because that is a potential long-term starter at the shortstop position, an impact all-star type of starter.
Yeah.
If you're signing him for 6, 7, 8 years.
Yeah. So of the shortstops at the dollar amounts that they're sort of projected to be at, you've got Correa, you've got Trey Turner, you've got Dansby Swanson, you've got Xander Bogaerts. Of those four, if Andrew Friedman came to you and said, Justin, which of these four at the dollar amount that they're asking for would you sign? Where is the best value to be had for the Dodgers? Would it be Correa?
I think probably, although the caveat I'll add is the Dodgers have done a lot with defensive positioning and bringing in guys and kind of improving their defensive metrics based off positioning. If they feel like they might be able to do that with Xander Bogaerts, I think he's probably the best option. His defensive numbers have not been good in the last few years. Offensively, still a very good option. So if they feel like he can be maybe not even an average shortstop, but slightly below average, Xander Bogaerts, I think, would be a very enticing option as well.
Okay, there you go. We needed somebody to stick up for Xander Bogaerts. That's the one guy I feel like I haven't heard sort of an argument in favor of. So, just go a little bit deeper there. Because I would say Dansby Swanson, the 1 year franchise year, best year of his career year, that terrifies me. But at the same time, when I look at his profile, he feels like the type of guy that makes sense for the Dodgers. Just plays solid defense, just kind of the type of hitter, the type of baseball player he is, as cliche as that sounds. It just feels like the type of guy that the Dodgers would like. And also, the rumors are that the Braves offered him 6 years, $100 million. He's going to do better than that. But if we're closer to $16 million than we are to $35 million, all of a sudden Dansby Swanson becomes a pretty compelling option. Obviously, I've made the case that I wouldn't hate the Gavin Lux thing. That's just me if we're talking about defensive positioning and stuff like that. Again, under the circumstances of that money gets spent elsewhere and it's on an Aaron Judge or that type of player coming in as well. Obviously the Correa one is obvious. The Trey Turner one's obvious. So talk to me a little bit more about Xander Bogaerts. You said hey, if they can improve his defensive stuff, what do you like about the offensive profile for Bogaerts?
He's been a really good hitter for a long time. And I think he's the oldest of the 4 shortstops on the free agent market, the 4 big shortstops. He's 30, and I don't think any of the other guys are 30.
They're all kind of in the same ballpark, like 29 to 30, I think.
Yeah.
But yeah, I see what you're saying.
So I'm looking at a couple things here. His outs above average was in the 88th percentile this year. So I don't think that's where he's been in past years. Okay. So in 2021, he was in the 1st percentile for outs above average. So whether there was like a change, whether he made an actual change or there was some positioning thing that he did to, score better in that metric, I don't know. But I do think that not an option to be dismissed with, the other guys looking fairly expensive. And I agree. I think with Swanson, you're kind of wary of the contract year bump and whether or not that's going to repeat itself based on the career he's had.
Yeah. So there you go. THP throws it up here. Correa is the youngest of the bunch. He's 28. Swanson is also 28, but he turns 29 in February. Trey Turner is 29. He'll turn 30 in June. And then Xander Bogaerts just turned 30. So we're basically talking about a bunch of guys that are all within an 18 to 24 month span here. But obviously, if you're talking about an 8-year contract, 18 to 24 months can be a pretty big deal because those are prime months rather than months that you're going to be paying $35 million a year for on the back end in some of these cases. And so, interesting there. Again, I think shortstop wise, there's some options. Let me move to question number 4 here. And again, it's one that I've kind of hinted at here. Where are you at on Aaron Judge? Obviously, we know the money that it's going to take. The Dodgers, as expected, have been connected to him, whether that's a real connection or whether that's just the classic, let's just say the Dodgers are interested because nobody will ever be able to prove us wrong. Where are you at on Aaron Judge and the absolutely monstrous deal that he will surely be signing?
Sign him. Who cares? It's a valid argument that the Dodgers' biggest need is not a guy he's played some center, but he's likely a corner outfielder as he ages into his 30s, which he will on whatever deal he signs. The Dodgers also didn't need Freddie Freeman last year, and Freddie Freeman became available through a number of circumstances. And at least reading, various reporting pieces, it doesn't seem like the Judge market is going to be that wide. Like, heard the Yankees, heard maybe the Mets, although they're investigating whether or not there was a conversation between Hal Steinbrenner and Steve Cohen about that. Potentially the Giants. I know they've been rumored a lot. He's from Northern California. And the Dodgers. It doesn't seem like there are a whole lot of other teams that are really in the mix, and that can, of course, change. Yeah. But with that small a market for this good of a player, you have to take a long look at that. Yeah. Offensively, he was the best player in baseball this year, and it wasn't that close.
Yeah, one of the best players of all time.
Yeah. I mean, he had a truly historic season. And if you can get, prime Aaron Judge offensive output, not talking 60-plus home runs again every year, but if you can get prime Aaron Judge for the next 3, 4, 5 years, why not?
Yeah. I mean, looking just at his page, 2017, the guy played 155 games, put up 8.7 wins above replacement. So there's your Cody Bellinger breakout year in 2017. But what the difference between Judge and Bellinger is that Judge has basically sustained it. 5.3 wins above replacement, despite missing 50 games in 2018. 2019, he misses 60 games, 4.3 wins above replacement, which again is a very good season. 2020 plays just 20 games. So we're talking about 50 missed games, 60 missed games, 30 missed games in those three. But then 2021 and 2022, he's only missed 19 games between them, 5.5 wins above replacement. And then the absolutely stupid 11.4 that, like, you're just going to come across 20 years from now and you're going to be like, what the hell is that? 11.4 in wins above replacement. And so, like you said, but I mean, if it's not going to be 11.4, but I don't think it's crazy to assume that he's going to settle into the 6-ish wins above replacement as sort of an average over the next 5 years. And with the designated hitter, like, you would think that the hit tool, even if the defense starts to slip, that the hit tool is going to be there. And I mean, when we put the 11.4 in perspective, second place was Manny Machado at 7.4. So, I mean, if Judge settles into the 6 to 7, we're talking about a 5 to 15 in the wins above replacement leaderboards type player, playing left field, hitting home runs, I'm interested. So I'll just push a little bit more. Like, if the Dodgers, if that was their big splash, would you be arguing, hey, this money could have been spent better elsewhere? Or would you be saying, I love it, I feel good about it?
Definitely the latter.
Okay.
It is not a mistake to sign a guy like Aaron Judge.
Yeah.
That is there's no way to spend that money badly if he produces, prime Aaron Judge results for, the next few years.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I'm with you. I mean, and again, I think it feels like the narrative around Aaron Judge before this season made me forget just how good he's been. I mean, yeah, he's missed some time, and I know that was a concern, but he's put together back-to-back full seasons. Again, he just showed that his ceiling is literally one of, like, the greatest hitters of all time. We're talking about, like, the guy hit 311. So he had a dramatically better batting average than Trey Turner, 13 points higher than Trey Turner hit, while also hitting 41, 3 times more home runs than Trey Turner did. Like, to put that in perspective, while also playing a competent corner outfield, like, is that a fair assessment? He mixed in some center field this year, but at his position, which is a less valuable position, he's a better defender than Trey Turner is also, right?
I'd have to look to double check that, but yeah, he's not like a defensive liability.
Yeah.
And he was doing that playing right field. So you throw him in left field where you typically throw your worst outfielder and he'd be more than fine. Or, you have Mookie in center and Aaron Judge in right field and you're fine there too. Like, that's not a bad outfield.
Yeah.
And one thing I do want to address, because I have seen this a couple times, either in my mentions or other people's mentions on Twitter, the concept that he is not a quote unquote postseason performer. I would just say, go look at Corey Seager's stats before 2020 in the postseason. Go look at Mookie Betts' stats before 2020 in the postseason. Everyone's a postseason performer. Everyone's not a postseason performer until they are, and they are until they aren't. Like, when you're dealing with small sample sizes, it's like, it's tough to draw too much into that. And you're not going to not sign Aaron Judge because, like, well, he's not as good in the postseason. And it's just not a valid thing to think about.
A 772 OPS in the postseason, Justin, I'd kill for that. That's like, isn't that a great number? 772. I feel like he'd be the second best hitter on the Dodgers, I think, with that mark.
There was someone in my mentions a couple weeks ago who said he was a bad postseason performer. And I've seen it like a couple other places. And he hasn't been like Aaron Judge in the postseason, but he's not a postseason performer until he is, and then he's a postseason hero.
Yeah, and again, that's 772 to be clear. He hit 211, 310 on base. I'm not saying the guy's amazing. I'm just saying 772, when you put it in perspective, like, compared to a lot of the guys on the Dodgers system, we'd be thrilled with 772 there. So it is worth noting about Judge, by the way, that he's older than all of the guys that we just mentioned. He'll be 31 in April. So I believe that makes him older than all the shortstops as well. Obviously different positional needs, but worth pointing out. He is a huge guy. Somebody in the comments pointing out he's 6'7". He's massive, 282 pounds. So do you want to bet on 6'7", 280, aging well over the next 7 years? I think is a fair question. But I would say that Trey Turner, while it's not 6'7", 280, it's, 80 grade speed. Those two things, I think both are reasonable to question how those are going to age over the next 7 or 8 years as well. All right, let's move on. 2 more questions here, and then we can get to folks' questions, or we can talk Thanksgiving items. Up to the people. This is your sweet spot, Justin. And so I want to ask you, which prospects are ready to contribute for 2023? If I'm seeing them in my mentions, I am sure your mentions are filled with them. They're the people that say James Outman is ready to be the Dodgers starting center fielder, and one of those might be me in your mentions, by the way. Miguel Vargas, Michael Busch, some of the pitching guys that you've mentioned, Bobby Miller, Gavin Stone. So we can get to the Rule 5 decisions in a minute, but let's start with just like, who are the guys that if you're putting together the Dodgers 26-man opening day roster, you're saying, I want to make room because A, it's going to be good for this player's development, but also B, they're actually ready. They're ready to be the guy that we count on in this spot.
So number one on that list, I think, has to be Miguel Vargas.
Yeah.
He was the guy they brought up in September. He was the guy they had on the postseason roster. And I don't think he ever got an at-bat, but he was the guy they had on that roster. And with Justin Turner maybe coming back, maybe not coming back, if he doesn't come back, there are ABs left at a position that he plays.
Yeah.
So even with Max Muncy there, who'd probably be like the quote unquote everyday third baseman, there's still room for Miguel Vargas there, and he's played a little second base, he's played a little left field, and yeah, fair.
Left field. It's like, yeah. And you know what you just said, Justin, factually accurate. He has played some left field.
Yeah, they've thrown him out there, and he, for a guy who's mostly a corner infielder through his young minor league career, he did fine. I think he did. He's not going to win a Gold Glove out in left field, but like he didn't embarrass himself out there.
Yeah.
At least from what I saw.
Do you have him higher or lower than Gavin Lux in your defensive rankings out in left field?
You know what? Give Gavin Lux an offseason working in the outfield. I think he would be an above-average outfield defender.
You and me both, Justin. We're on the same page on that one. Okay, so you like Vargas. You think Vargas is ready?
Yeah. I think what he did last year as, I believe, a 22-year-old in AAA, not just high performance, but doing it on a consistent basis. And I say this as someone who, is following games on like a day-to-day level. He was getting on base pretty much every day. He was just an extremely consistent guy outside of like a very minor cold stretch in the middle of the summer that was like 2 weeks long. He was very consistent, and it's the kind of bat the Dodgers need. And well, maybe not anymore. I feel like I'm going back to a traditional stereotype from a couple of years ago, because they do have a lot of consistent bats now at the top of the order.
Okay, so you like Vargas. Outman's the other guy everybody wants to ask about. You had him as the number 21 prospect in your system at the midseason update. I'm guessing that he's trended up, has only trended up since then. Obviously, I think you and I both agree we shouldn't be overreacting to the 7 plate appearances that he saw at the major league level or whatever. But this is a guy that, Josh Thomas, who's a guy that you and I both follow, who does a lot of prospect stuff, specifically on the Oklahoma City. And he said, hey, this is a guy who, projects as a plus defender out there. We're not talking about plus like Cody Bellinger, but a plus defender out there. I think he said he won best defensive outfielder in the Arizona Fall League when he was down there. And as much as the hit tool sort of lagged, it showed up this year. Now, from your perspective, did anything change on the offensive profile for James Outman this season? Or do you just write it off as, I need to see more of it, and I need to see it not at AAA?
Yeah, I think so. I think, you're not just going to write off performance, especially when now this is a couple years of consistent offensive performance, and he seems like he is getting better. And I've read a couple interviews where he's talked about how he, reworked his entire swing, and he feels like he's only getting better as he gets more and more years and more plate appearances with that swing. So, I don't think it's a stretch to say that, he could be a starting center fielder next year. Now, at the same time, I wouldn't say, all right, we're going to throw Outman in center field and that'll be our plan. And we're good there. I wouldn't say that, because we're still talking about a guy who has 4 major league games. And I think it's really easy to look at Cody Bellinger over the last 2 years and Outman in the 4 games he had at the major league to be like, oh yeah, of course he can at least do that. Yeah. And it's definitely within his range of outcomes. Absolutely. But it's not a guarantee. Yeah. And that, that's part of the risk of Bellinger is he did what he did, but that feels like the bottom of where he is. And what you're getting. You're getting at least that with him. Outman, you don't know. He could be better. There's a chance he could be worse. But I certainly don't have a problem with, if you strike out on a couple of free agents, if you address some other needs in free agency in the trade market, and you go into next year with Outman or Trace Thompson, one of those guys trying to win a job, not necessarily the worst scenario. And if it's really bad, it's something that you can upgrade mid-season.
You led to my next question. I don't know why I'm asking you to place bets here, but I'm going to. Trace Thompson or James Outman, who would you rather bet on for 2023?
I'll go Trace Thompson.
Offensive and defensive. Okay, so you're in on Trace. The strikeout numbers don't completely terrify you.
They do, but the batted ball numbers are legit, and they're really, really good. So, he might strike out 40% of the time, but if he's going to hit the ball, when he hits the ball, if he's going to hit it like he did in 2022, he can be a productive player for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I was the Trace Thompson guy all towards the end of the season saying they better, like, when is this guy going to play every day? He's better than Bellinger. He's better than all these guys. So I'm pro Trace. I think I'm the guy that we would disagree on Outman, and you know more than me, so I'm not saying I disagree because I know more. To me, I look at Bellinger's numbers and I'm like, maybe I can't guarantee he's going to do that, but I just find it hard to believe that he couldn't give me 90% of what Cody Bellinger was going to give me total package, offense and defense, and obviously be doing it for about $18 million less than Cody Bellinger was going to cost. Again, I'm overreacting to Outman. I like him as a person. In every interview that I've seen, he seems awesome. I loved the whole story about his first game and hitting the home run and the whole thing. I like that he plays defense. I remember him popping off the screen to me 2 years ago in spring training and being like, who the hell is this guy out in center field? Because he's making diving catches and that kind of thing. And so I just like the profile. I want it to be good. I also need to listen to smart people like you and tell me, hey, just because you want it to be good doesn't necessarily mean it's necessarily going to be good. So you're in on Vargas. It sounds like, correct me if I'm wrong, you're in on Outman as part of a rotation in the outfield. Like if I told you that Outman made the opening day roster as like the fourth outfielder, assuming Chris Taylor doesn't qualify as an outfielder, like if it was Trace Thompson, James Outman, Mookie Betts, and a free agent as your outfield with Chris Taylor also sort of lingering there, sounds like you feel okay with that.
Yeah, I think I would.
Anybody else? So let's move to the Michael Busch, I think is the other interesting name. Now, we're starting to run out of room, which I think is when they decided to cut ties with Edwin Rios, when they decided to cut ties with Cody Bellinger, I said, at some point, you only get 13 offensive spots. Let me pull up my notes because I ran through kind of the guys that are obviously guaranteed. Barnes, Smith, Freeman, Lux, Muncy, Betts, Taylor. That's 7 locks for the 13 offensive players that they get to start the year. We talked about Trace Thompson. That would be 8. We talked about Vargas. That would be 9. Justin Turner comes back, that's 10. Then all of a sudden, we haven't talked about a shortstop solution yet. We haven't talked about Outman. We haven't talked about Michael Busch. And so where do you sit on a guy like Michael Busch as things start to get complicated? And I apologize, I'm asking a terrible question here. But the Edwin Rios non-tender seems like you could draw a straight line to a Michael Busch conversation.
I don't know if it's a straight line. I think there might be a line there. There is a slight positional difference. Busch has experience playing first base. That's what a lot of people had him as coming out of the draft. The Dodgers drafted him as a second baseman, and they played him as a second baseman throughout the minor leagues, and he is now passable at second base. He also has experience in corner outfield. He played a little bit of left field at OKC this year for the first time since college. So positionally, he's a guy who probably mostly second base, some first base, some left field, some DH. For me, the question is whether he's going to have a major league spot if it's not regular at-bats, whether it'd be better for him, and I do think it'd be better for him, I'll answer my own question, to get everyday at-bats playing at AAA, and if there's a performance issue, if there's an injury, being one of the first, being the first guy or the second guy up to fill that spot with him now having a 40-man spot.
Yeah, so if we go Will Smith at catcher, Freddie Freeman at first, Busch at second, Lux at short, Vargas at third, Muncy batting DH, Betts, Outman, and Trace. You're not necessarily loving that as the opening day lineup there.
I think that team would make the playoffs. I do. And look, if you get into the playoffs, you can win the World Series. Right. You can win 87 games, 88 games, and go on a hot streak and win, especially with all those young guys. I think if you play, Outman and Busch and Vargas the whole year, one of them's bound to, break out and become, I'd say, maybe not a major impact player, but a definite impact player.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I love it. I mean, because people bashing the Dodgers lineup like, oh, they suck. It's like they still have Mookie Betts. They still have Freddie Freeman. They still have Will Smith. I'm still a Max Muncy believer. I don't think he became a terrible hitter. So you put those 4 guys in the middle of the lineup. I believe in Gavin Lux, the profile of what he is. Like, I think he's going to hit, 270, 280 with a little bit of power. So all of a sudden you start stacking these guys that even if Outman, Thompson, Busch, Vargas are sort of the 4 question marks at the back of your lineup. I like you said, if we compare it to last year's lineup, you might be disappointed. If you compare it to every other lineup in the league, I think you start to be, you find that it's more compelling, maybe than it gets credit for. On the prospect side, pitching wise, Pepio, Grove, Jackson, Stone, Miller, all guys you've mentioned already. Talk to me about who you feel good about 2023 specific.
So I think if you're putting the odds on most starts or most innings, probably Pepio is the favorite.
Yeah.
He has the most major league experience out of that group. He was the guy who they called up for spot starts or for strings of starts when they needed a guy last year. And a lot of it depends on what they do with that last rotation spot, because you have Kershaw, then not officially, but you have Kershaw, you have Julio, you have Dustin May coming off Tommy John surgery. And I think it's, reasonable to say, well, is he going to pitch 170 innings? They might try to limit his workload a little bit. Tony Gonsolin, who was great, but also had some injury issues at the end of the year, another guy who they might try to, just limit his workload a little bit so that he's still going strong towards the end of the year. And then you have the fifth spot, and you maybe have Walker Buehler coming back at the end of the year. I would be surprised if they did nothing in the rotation. I think they'll go and get someone, whether it's a potential high-end starter like a DeGrom or a Verlander, or more of a depth guy, or maybe a guy like Kodai Senga, who, has really good stuff, but you don't exactly know what he's going to be.
Yeah. So you sort of, I love how you answer some of these questions where you're like, well, if you're asking who I think is going to make the most starts next season, it's like, well, yeah, Pepio. Who does Justin Lorber feel the most confident taking the ball in 2023? Let's say it's middle of the season. It's the first game after the All-Star break. Who's the guy of the group that we're talking about that you're like, I think I would feel good if this guy was pitching meaningful starts in 2023?
I think at that point, you're talking about Bobby Miller or Gavin Stone.
Okay.
They'll have another half season of AAA under their belt at that point. And both of those guys got sent up to AAA at the end of the year, and both of them had really impressive starts. Yeah. I'm pretty sure Bobby Miller struck out like 14 in one start. Gavin Stone had a string of starts. He led the entire minor leagues in ERA last year, for people who don't know that.
Yeah.
Really impressive. His ERA was like 1.6 the whole year. And he either led or was close to the lead among Dodger pitchers in the minors in innings pitched. So it's not like he was doing that on a smaller number of innings. He was a workhorse.
Yeah.
So one of those two guys mid-season, I would expect one or even both of them to be ready if necessary, if the circumstances call for it.
And you would have Pepio behind both of them sort of as you're projecting out in 2023 at the major league level?
I think if you're talking about the end of the year, yeah, I would lean that way, but also can't dismiss the chance that Pepio's given a shot to be in the rotation for an extended period of time and earns his way, to remain in that rotation. I wouldn't be surprised by that at all.
Yeah, if he can, I mean, look, it's a big if. Can he throw strikes? But he has the stuff. Like, we've seen that. Grove, Jackson, I mean, are either of those guys interesting to you, or are they just the next Mitch White sort of depth piece in the organization? No disrespect to Mitch White, by the way.
Yeah, Mitch White, very valuable over a course of years for the Dodgers, filling a number of roles. And yeah, I think those guys are probably both kind of in that Mitch White role, Mitch White scenario. And look, if injuries happen and one of them gets a shot to be in a rotation, yeah, they could earn their way, but I'm more likely a depth piece shuffling between spot start and relief, especially with Miller and Pepio and Gavin Stone and someone like Nick Destrini, who finished the year at AA. With those guys, continuing to come up, tough to find consistent innings for them at the major league level.
So THP points out 14 strikeouts in 6 innings for Bobby Miller against the Astros AAA team there as well. Let's talk Rule 5 draft real quick, because I know this is kind of your sweet spot. The Dodgers, they end up protecting Diego Cartaya, Michael Busch, Andy Pages. Those three absolute no-brainers. The fourth guy that they protected, Johnny DeLuca, which satisfied the mandatory Oregon Duck on the 40-man roster, which they then cemented by adding Jake Reed back to the 40-man roster. So the day we lose Tyler Anderson, Justin, we get Johnny DeLuca in there. So we feel good about our Oregon Ducks position moving forward with this guy on the 40-man roster. Jose Ramos, I believe, was the fifth guy that you had talked about potentially protecting. So again, Cartaya, Pages, Busch, no-brainers. We knew that was going to happen. Talk to me a little bit about DeLuca, and is Ramos a guy that you think they might lose in the Rule 5 draft?
So start with DeLuca, former 25th rounder out of Oregon. He was a draft eligible sophomore and a guy who has had a couple really good years the last couple years. Power speed combo, plays all three outfield positions. I don't think he quite got to a 2020 season this year, but I think he did last year. I'd have to double check the numbers. But power speed combo, and a lot of times with those guys, you see some contact issues, a lot of strikeouts. His strikeout rate has been below 20% in every single minor league stop he's had. So the contact issues aren't necessarily there with those power speed guys. He's a little bit older, but really good performance. He got hurt towards the end of the year, and I think he missed the last month or so with an injury, but didn't look like that hurt him in his quest to be added to the 40-man roster.
Yeah, just real quick, 25 homers, 17 steals this year. 22 homers and 20 steals the year before. Man, this guy's also from Thousand Oaks. This might be my new guy. He's just from my hometown. Then he goes up to University of Oregon. We're all in on DeLuca. Talk to me about Ramos real quick.
So Ramos, profile-wise, kind of similar to Andy Pages. Guy who can play center, but probably a better fit in right. Really, really strong arm, a ton of power. Some of the biggest exit velocities in the entire Dodgers organization. That includes the major league.
Yeah.
This guy can smoke the ball, and had only played up to high A, so he was in a very similar spot as Yorbe Vivas and Eddie's Leonard last year. Those two both got protected, and if you're asking me, I have Ramos above those two, and I think even if you're comparing it to last year, I think it'd be fair to say Ramos is above where those guys were at this point last year from a value perspective. So I was a little surprised to see him not get protected. But at the same time, we're also got to ask whether a major league team is going to potentially hamper his development and keep him on a major league roster for an entire season when he hasn't even had a double A at bat yet.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, last one here. Pitching rotation. We've kind of touched on it, so we can just summarize what we said. Urias is the bona fide ace of the Dodgers staff. He has proven that over the past few years. He's the guy that, I was in the comments with somebody. He's the only guy that I personally would feel comfortable penciling in for more than like 22 starts next season. Like, some people are like, someone sent me a steamer projection that May and Gonsolin are going to make a combined 52 starts or something like that. And I don't know where those 52 starts are going to be coming from. I would not be betting on that. Kershaw made 22 starts this past season. So you've got Urias. Again, Kershaw, as we record this 9 days ago, was reports where he signed. Nothing official has happened since. We expect Kershaw to be back. May and Gonsolin, as you said, will be healthy come spring training. But coming off of weird seasons from an injury perspective for both of them. And then you've got the glut of prospects that we've already touched on. Andrew Heaney's a free agent. He could be brought back if they wanted to go that route. You've mentioned Verlander. You've mentioned DeGrom. How would you sort of patch together a rotation if you were the Dodgers?
So I'm not sure you need another frontline piece. I think that it's reasonable to hope that Kershaw is at least healthy for the parts that matter next year. Dustin May, with another year back from Tommy John surgery, looks more like the guy he has shown he has the potential to be in his good starts. Tony Gonsolin is obviously fantastic this year. I don't think there's any reason to think why he couldn't do that again. Maybe not, an ERA in the low twos, but a valuable guy who can be a number two in any rotation, or even a number one in certain rotations across baseball. So with those four guys, I'm not sure if you need to go get a DeGrom or a Verlander. I mentioned I like Kodai Senga, I like Carlos Rodon, but I don't know if you need exactly that caliber of guy. I think if you're talking just purely depth, there are a number of guys who they could go get, like a Tyler Anderson, or even bring back an Andrew Heaney type, and then hope one of your young prospects steps up to take a role. And then, you're talking about 5, 6, maybe even 7 major league caliber starters with a number of guys who you'd feel comfortable with in a playoff game.
Yeah, some folks in the comments are mentioning Ross Stripling. I don't know. I haven't even looked at if he's a free agent or something like that. But is that a guy that you would be interested in?
If I'm remembering correctly, he had a pretty good year this year.
Yeah, he had a 3.01 ERA. So
I'm not sure if Toronto would trade him.
He is. It's a 2023. He is an unrestricted free agent. So,
I mean, maybe, but I'm not sure if that's necessarily a guy that you would target just because he's been in the organization before.
Yeah, no qualifying offer. So people are commenting there. So you're good with things as is. It sounds like on the pitching side. I mean, good with, again, relative to if we're talking about a scenario where there's a limited number of resources available. you're like, hey, I feel good about Urias, Kershaw, May, and Gonsolin as a 1 through 4, and I feel good about Miller, Stone, Pepio, plus the next Andrew Heaney type for 1 year, $9 million contract, sort of patching together the back end of a rotation. Is that fair?
I think you need one more guy.
Okay.
I think I'm the guy in Ocean's 11 saying I think you need one more.
Okay.
I
mean,
think
you mentioned Kodai Senga. Like, I mean, what do you know about him? I'm not expecting you to have done a full deep dive necessarily, but it sounds like you know more than I do.
upper 90s velo. He throws what is called a ghost forkball.
I'm in. You already told me. Ghost forkballs. I'm in.
Yeah. Yes, it seems like a guy who does really good stuff coming out of Japan, and this is potentially fun arm.
Yeah.
So, and I know they've been linked to him as well. That's another reason I brought it up. I know they have been. I think I've seen multiple tweets that is like they're part of a group of teams interested in him, and then I remember seeing one just individually, like the Dodgers are interested in Kodai Senga.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, let's get to some questions, folks. If you've got some questions in the chat, throw those in there. I'll start off with the Thanksgiving question that I've been dancing around here, Justin. Obviously, it's Sunday. We've got a few days until Thanksgiving for folks joining us live. Do you have any like spicy food takes on Thanksgiving? Like, are you anti a particular dish that is popular, or very pro a off the beaten path? I'll lead with my, in some circles, hot take. I think stuffing sucks. I'm out on all stuffing. I think it's terrible. So that I'll lead with that. Do you have anything that can top that?
I agree with you, and I am going to want your hot take. I think Thanksgiving food as a whole genre is overrated.
Okay.
I think it is. Like I'll see on social media like blurry photos of people's food on a paper plate and be like best meal of the year. And I'm like, really?
Okay.
So yeah, I think Thanksgiving food just as a general thing is overrated.
Yeah, I mean, like I've been places where turkey is done right. I feel like 95% of places I've been, turkey is like just super mediocre.
Yeah.
Mashed potatoes, elite mashed potatoes. Apple pie, elite. Like we're talking upper echelon of just foods in general. So I'm in on mashed potatoes. I'm in on some of the sides, but I'm with you. I'm not going to say I wouldn't go as far as you, but it's not my favorite. So there we go. All right, let's get to some of these questions. Solon Style does agree with us, by the way, that stuffing does suck. Let's see. Any non-tendered free agents you think the Dodgers should look at? I know former Cardinals closer Alex Reyes got cut and could be interesting.
Yeah, Alex Reyes for sure. Brian Anderson as well from the Marlins.
The guy that the forever Dodger linked Brian. Isn't he the guy that like every trade deadline the Dodgers are rumored to be interested in acquiring?
It's either him or Garrett Cooper. It's always one of them, or sometimes it's both.
I might have forgotten Cooper. They basically seem like the same person to me.
Yeah. And then I'm not sure exactly what the fit would be is here, especially if Justin Turner comes back. But if we're just talking like right-handed bench bat and like somewhat DH, Luke Voigt, someone who I wouldn't be – he can probably get a starting job somewhere.
Okay.
But if he's willing to accept like a bench role against lefties primarily, I think it'd be a solid bench bat.
Yeah, I'm going to throw these up. Adam says honey baked ham. That's absolutely the right answer. Honey baked ham over turkey in all scenarios. I'm pro that. And then to answer Dave's question, apple pie over pumpkin pie is probably the easiest question I've ever been asked in the history of the world, because Dutch apple pie with ice cream is the single greatest meal in the history of the world, and I'm calling it a meal. So do you disagree with me on this, Justin? Are you a pumpkin pie guy?
I agree with your take. I'm not going to comment on you calling it a meal.
Okay.
I'll just leave that one alone.
Fair. Eddie wants to know how much and how many years you think Verlander actually gets. You mentioned he was asking for 3/140 is reportedly the ask. Where do you think this lands for a guy that is on the wrong side of 40 already, and yet just won the Cy Young?
Is he 40? How old is he? Because Verlander signed his deal when he was 38.
Okay, let me look this up. He is 39. Excuse me. He will be 40 in February. He'll be 40 in February.
Okay, so you were talking about age 40, 41, 42 seasons.
Potentially.
I don't think he gets the Scherzer deal. I'll say that.
Okay.
Do
you think he gets 3 years?
I could see it. I think I will go. Let's do 3 years, $105 million. will be my guess.
3 years, 105. Would you? But based on the conversation we had, I gather you would not be thrilled if that was the contract given out by the Dodgers to Justin Verlander.
I think it puts a lot of, and again, he was great this year. Really, really good. Like probably one of the best age 39 seasons for a pitcher ever, if not the best. But it's tough to commit that kind of money, even for a 3-year deal for age 40, 41, 42 seasons. I know like he's built different. He's a Hall of Fame.
The velo is trending up.
Yeah. Like he's crazy. But it's still like I'd be wary of doing that. But he's a good pitcher, so worse things to be done.
Yeah, I'm with you. I mean, if you could get him on a 2-year deal, I couldn't go 3 personally. If it's 270 or something like that, sure, I'm interested. But who knows? I mean, I bet like 390 is out there for him. I bet there's some team somewhere that will give him that, which is basically 2 for 70, and we'll give you $20 million in your age 43 season or 42 season or whatever it is. And so who knows? Let's get to the last one because I forgot to mention this when we talked about Judge. A lot of people saying that signing Judge and moving Mookie Betts to second base. Is there any scenario in which Mookie Betts is playing second base for the Dodgers in your mind?
I think there's a scenario where he's playing like 20 to 30 games at second base. Yes. I really have a hard time seeing him moving there 100 plus games and being the regular starter.
Yeah. I mean, to me, I get that people like look at the quote that says he likes playing second base. I don't see anywhere in there where he says he hates playing right field or where he doesn't want to play right field or any of those types of things. He is the best defensive right fielder in all of baseball. And so the idea that you would move him out of that position to second base, which is very low on the premium position rankings, I believe, to me doesn't make a ton of sense. And so the moral of the story is they can sign Judge and Judge can play left field and Mookie can play right field and everyone will be fine. The Dodgers happen to have a hole in left field right now that's massive. It's an Aaron Judge size hole out there. And so I don't think you need to sort of decide between the two of those. So let's end it there. Justin, I appreciate you joining us. Like I said, Sunday before Thanksgiving. So thanks for hopping on. Do you have any crazy predictions? Like, do you want to throw out a crazy prediction for the offseason for the Dodgers? I'm putting you on the spot here, so you don't have to. I mean, like if I had to make a crazy, like give me a bold prediction, I would say there's a real chance that Gavin Lux is the starting shortstop for the Dodgers next season. That would be my crazy prediction. Do I think it's actually going to come true? No. But do I think there's a higher chance than people out in the world are giving it? Yes. That's where I land on that one.
Here, so it like a half cop out answer. I think their biggest offseason addition will be via trade. I don't know who it'll be, but I think it'll be via trade instead of via free agency.
Okay. I like it. That's Justin Lorber. Check his stuff at Future Dodgers on social media, futuredodgers.com as well. Again, Justin, thanks for joining us. Folks joining us live, we very much appreciate you. Folks joining us via podcast, we very much appreciate you. You can always check out our shows on podcast, Spotify, Google, Apple, wherever you get it. Just search for Dodger Heads. Follow, rate, review. We very much appreciate that. If you're a YouTube person, subscribe, ring the notification bell, and of course, check out DodgerBlue.com, DodgerBlue1958 on social media. Next Sunday night, we might be taking a week off, but we'll be here most Sunday nights live, whether it's me and Matt, me and Daniel, or me and somebody like Justin. So be sure to follow here so you can get all the latest updates when news does break. Enjoy the rest of your night, enjoy the rest of your day, and of course, as always, go Dodgers.